Hi everyone, this is Van Riper. I'm the Google Developer Group's Program Manager here at Google, and this is our second edition of Google Developers Tech Roundup. And here with me, my co-host Stephanie.
Hi everyone, my name is Stephanie Liu. I also work on the Developer Relations team, leading the Global Programs team.
And Adriana.
Hi everybody, I'm Adriana Turindolo, the Community Manager for Google Developer Groups.
And our special guest today is Fred.
Hi Van, thanks for having me. Stephanie, Adriana. I'm a developer advocate on the Google Cloud Platform team. I'm really excited to be here today, and I have actually a little demo in store for later, if you let me.
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
So we thought we'd start off today, given that we're in the summer blockbuster season. We were talking about movies, and we started talking about our favorite hacker movies. So we thought we'd go around and talk about what our favorite hacker movies were. So how about you, Stephanie?
Okay, so question of the day. Okay, so I won't say it's necessarily my favorite, but it's definitely the one that is stuck in my mind the most for a reason. I think it happened during my formative years. I saw this in high school before perhaps some more iconic hacker movies, but it was Antitrust. I don't know if you guys remember Ryan Phillippe, a young Ryan Phillippe as a computer whiz, and like we had a fake Bill Gates and like this whole thing, and it was action packed. There was murder and intrigue, and also I think it was the first time I saw like a command prompt, like it was like a Unix command prompt on like he's like hacking the system from like a daycare or something, like on a movie screen. And there's also like a nice open source message at the end, So I thought it was a fun, like again, kind of a mainstream computer program, like the protagonist being a computer programmer.
Cool. What about you, Adriana?
I really love action movies and great special effects, so I'm going to have to say Tron. So I don't know if that constitutes, technically as a hacker movie. I feel like it is, but I totally enjoyed it, and Jeff Bridges is just an awesome actor, so you can never go wrong with him.
So the remake, not the original Tron.
Well, it's not a remake, it's a sequel.
Well,
Sequel.
Sequel.
Oh,
yeah.
The sequel. I guess I have to go back in time and actually watch the original first, so I'll put that on my list of things to do this summer.
Sorry.
So how about you, Fred?
It's going to have to be War Games.
Great choice.
It's a real easy one because it really brings kind of the computer hacker culture. The original meaning of hacker is not someone necessarily trying to break systems, but someone who sort of a geek and fiddles with stuff. And yeah, they know how it works. And but he sort of inadvertently uncovers the government program and ends up breaking into the wrong computer. And everything's very physical. There's a dial-up modem. You hear the squelch of the dial-up. He has these 5 1/4-inch floppy disks that he puts in and loads programs. There's a number of things in the movie that aren't quite real or possible, but that's kind of okay. It's on that edge of between Hollywood and reality, but it's a lot of fun. It talks about backdoors, and I think it really introduced a bunch of computer concepts to the general audience. And I've watched it many times, so definitely #1 movie.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my favorites. I guess I'll throw another one in there. I also liked Sneakers. One of the things in that one is I thought at least it kind of portrays them as not just these nerdy geeks. At least the head guy, Robert, that's played by Robert Redford, is kind of this cool guy.
Yeah.
Cool guy.
Yeah, kind of thing. And actually, I mean, the plot of that is kind of, there's some things about it that are off, but you think about it in the context of current events around the NSA and what was going on in that one, it's kind of a freaky story, storyline parallels some of the fictitious stuff that's been going on lately.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So I actually ended up not watching Sneakers. I only watched it for the first time like within the last 5 or 6 years. And I recognize there's a lot of iconic San Francisco stuff in there, including the Google office in SF. So they do the handoff in the Hills Plaza building, which is where we are now.
Awesome.
Before Google, existed or
It's a
whatever.
good connection.
That's pretty awesome.
Awesome. So we'd love to hear from all of you what your favorite movies are. We're on Google+. You can just shout out at us with hashtag GDTech and hashtag quote of the day. And share with us your favorite movies. Actually, our producer for today's show, Brian Grady, in the back here, was telling us that he believes the first ever hacker movie was Hot Millions in 1968. So if you know of an earlier movie than that, let us know. So with that, I think we'd like to move on to a few news items. I kind of want to preface this by saying, obviously, this is not a comprehensive news report. In fact, even inside of Google, it's hard for us to keep track of everything that's happening. And that's why we thought it would be important with this show to highlight for you a few interesting things that we think you may have missed in all the great happenings going on here from Google. So with that, we'll start with an update from Stephanie.
Well, I just wanted to talk about, like, I've been poking around a little bit with Polymer. So for those of you who haven't seen, it's in a pre-alpha release. So people who like living on the edge, definitely check it out. It's interesting if you just want to see kind of where the web is going. It's a bunch of libraries built on top of web components, and trying to kind of evangelize the use of the custom element, and making kind of like programming more declarative. Again, trying to make web programming more easier, making life easier for developers. So again, if you like living on the edge, check it out. It's in pre-alpha. They're looking for feedback. Give it a look.
Sounds good. Okay. And there, I think you had something to share.
Yeah,
as well.
I just want to share the Bigquery updates that I think are really important. Bigquery is great for processing large amounts of data, so this is really important for anyone who needs to do that. But for new features, we can now, you can output larger results per query. So before you couldn't do that. So now it's going to be, if you have a lot of data, you're going to have a lot, get ready for some really large tables. And then also we can now get more out of our data. So we can have new ways to rank and traverse results and explore distributions of percentiles. So it's really good to have these new features to more effectively just get more information and analysis out of data that we're collecting. So one great example of this actually is the data sensing project that we did at Google I/O this year. So in the last episode of the Roundup, we actually had Kim Cameron from the Bigquery team come in, and she did a little deep dive on what the data sensing project was all about. Go check that out if you haven't seen that already. But just the essence of that, in short, is that we collected some great environmental data at Moscone West from I/O, and kind of got some analysis on that using Bigquery. So for example, we got the temperature and air quality throughout different parts of the building, and we're able to get the median temperature over each room. And then we were also able to rank, for example, the rooms by their coldest median temp. So it's just some fun stuff that we were able to get using that. So also just back to the updates, just kind of icing on the cake too, is that there's now query caching. So Bigquery now remembers the values that you've previously calculated. It's just going to make the whole process a lot easier, simpler. So great news for all you big data crunchers out there.
Yeah, so also in the cloud space, like the big data work, we recently had some Android-related announcements. So Android Studio now has integrated support for building your back-end applications using Google App Engine for the back-end. And this is actually another thing that you would find on the Google Cloud Platform blog, as well as we just announced with the Bigquery. What's really nice about this is you can manage your application back-end, front-end, all in one place in Android Studio now, especially if you're a Java developer. You write your Java cloud backend and take advantage of the Google Cloud messaging that's built in. You will need on your account to actually set up enabling Google Cloud messaging, and also get an API key. But once you've done that, Android Studio takes care of everything, pulls down all the dependencies. The App Engine project is done using Apache Maven, so it'll pull all your App Engine dependencies down, and actually pulls down even the dependencies for Google Cloud messaging support into your Android app, so that you'll get that automatically, that synchronization across all platforms. So that's a really exciting update. Makes it even easier for the experienced developer to work all in one integrated environment. And if you're actually a new developer at App Engine, Fred's actually going to talk to us about something that makes it really easy for you to get started. So I'm going to turn it over to Fred now.
Okay. Well, you talked about the Google Cloud Platform blog, and actually just about a week and a half or so ago, we did a blog post about the Google Cloud Playground, which is something that I've been working on in my 20% time for some time now. And maybe before I show that to you, I should talk a little bit about the background and how I kind of got there. I've been working on App Engine for the last 4.5 years or so. And one sort of consistent piece of feedback I get from developers who are on the platform is, we really like the platform, we like the productivity. It's, just so nice not to have to manage machines. People, once they kind of buy into or start using a managed platform, they really don't want to go back into doing things themselves. At the same time, when I talk to new developers, I find that there's a big kind of hurdle to that first hello world program, if you will, where you're trying to get your environment set up, these new tools, and you just want to figure out how to run the thing end to end. You get those two simple words on the screen, hello world. And so, taking a step back, looking at these two different stories, it really feels like we're sort of asking developers to make an investment in our platform, download the stuff, get it installed, deal with the software conflicts, administrative rights, do all that stuff. And maybe that takes you half an hour. Maybe you spend 4 or 5 hours on it because there's something weird going on with your machine. So we're asking you to invest first, and then we're telling you, surely you'll fall in love. And it seems a little bit backwards to do it that way. I feel like maybe you should go on a date first, or you should have a chance to fall in love before you make that commitment and that investment. So with that in mind, I thought, well, how can I bring like dating to the cloud playground, or the cloud platform, and particularly let's start with App Engine because I've been working there a long time. So right here on this Chromebook, I've brought up the App Engine documentation, the Getting Started guide. And along with that blog post, we launched these little green buttons onto the Getting Started documentation for Python. And this is sort of the try me out button. Let's go on a date, a quick 60-second date.
Is what you're basically saying.
Yeah. Let's go have a root beer float. Let's go together.
Britta's built a dating application.
And the button's green, so let's click on that. And what it does, it takes you right into the cloud playground here, loads up the same source code, and let me just enlarge that a bit for you. And this is our Hello World sample code that we tell you to use. And with one click, I can see the output, and I can see Hello World right there. Now that was a lot easier than configuring a machine and downloading software, and am I doing it right, and watching a bunch of YouTube videos, and you can go on and on about how long it takes to get here. And I get this real-time experience. So let's change the code. Let's say hello tech roundup. Oh, and we need a hashtag. So GD Tech, right?
Yeehaw! Sorry.
We could. Oh, if only I could add sound effects. That's a future request right there.
Okay. Let's just put that in the queue for next time.
Very good. All right, so we've done Hello World, and now you want to take it maybe a step further, right? The drink's going well, and now let's order an appetizer or something else.
Dinner, maybe,
Maybe full dinner. Let's go up back to the main screen. So I just clicked on the Cloud Playground there, and I'm going to take our next app, which is the guest book, and we pop into that project, and we have a look there, and let's just run it and see what it looks like. And there's our guest book. Pretty simple application. If you walk through our documentation and you go through the different steps, at the end your Hello World is transformed into a guest book. So this is exactly kind of the getting started experience, but a little bit accelerated for this speed dating experience. So let's sign our guest book. I'm the first visitor here, and so I'm going to sign it with my name. This is actually persisting this data into the App Engine data store. Zero configuration. App Engine is replicating this data to multiple data centers. If a meteor comes down and hits one of the data centers, my app still keeps running. I mean, it's this kind of amazing technology, and it's all behind this little green button.
The easy button.
The easy button. So that's it. It's a really simple demo, but you can see how you can play around with the real APIs here. You can try out URL fetch and connect to another service on the internet. You can try the user's API, see what auth looks like. You can play with the App Engine data store. You can even configure Cloud SQL to play with a relational database. There's just any number of APIs that you can use on App Engine. You can try them out here. And then once you're really invested and you say, you know what, this is a great experience, I would like to take it up a level. I want to download the tools and I want to be productive offline. That's still there.
Mm-hmm. Sounds great. So, did you have some questions?
I do actually. So, what will be the next languages that will be available then after Python?
That's a very good question. That's a kind of a persistent question on the App Engine team. We just launched the PHP runtime. We'd already have an experimental Go runtime. In production, we have Python 2.7 and Java runtimes. So that's a pretty good question. The Cloud Playground, I started with Python 2.7 because that was just the easiest thing to do. Python is a scripted language where you can evaluate source code. So it's really easy to kind of create this playground experience because I can take your source code, I can just pass it to an eval function, and voila, it's there. With compiled languages like Java and Go, there's this obviously a compile step. And so that requires a little bit more work. And I've been sort of looking at that since our blog post went out and thinking maybe I can use Compute Engine to combine with App Engine and kind of do this compile step. But what was interesting is the blog post went out, and that same day I had 2 or 3 people walk into my office and say, how do we get my language going? I had the Go guy there, the Java guy there. I even had Seth, the Dart guy there. It's like, can I run Dart? And maybe so. Let's see what we can do to the playground. With a Compute Engine instance, it's a regular Linux VM. You can run any software you want. You can compile it. Maybe we can create some really cool experiences. I'm also looking for feedback from the community, like what's the most interesting thing to do next? What would make people the most productive?
So Google Compute Engine is one of the building blocks that makes this all possible?
Currently, this is just App Engine. But if I were to expand it and include Compute Engine, then the capabilities really get expanded there. And combining the two has a lot of benefits because App Engine allows this managed platform. Instances are scaled up automatically for you. You don't have to worry about a lot of things. And Compute Engine gives you this flexibility to run arbitrary binary code. Right. So combining those two things, and maybe together with some APIs to allow you to deploy like a private version of the playground so that you can play around it with just your source code, it's all possible.
Yeah, so you touched on the architecture, like the backend architecture a little bit. So one of the questions from the Google moderator that we sent out from Hussein in Colorado was about Angularjs. So if you want to talk a little bit about the front end of like how you built this.
Okay, yeah. So the Cloud Playground right now is kind of a stack, a 2-layer cake, if you will, 2-layer dessert cake. The bottom layer is this evaluation layer that just takes your source code and executes it and gives you the results back. And it's the part in this demo that displays this bottom green box here. That's where the output is. And there's no real UI for it. It's just running your code. And that piece in this open source repository there is called Mimic, because it's trying to mimic a real application environment, doing some tricks. On top of that, the top layer of the cake, the icing, is this user interface, and that's the Cloud Playground, everything that you've seen in the demo. And it's an Angularjs app because Angular is just really easy for like building web applications. And one thing that I really like about Angular is that when you view source, and let's do that right here. And actually, let's grab the project page, because that, or maybe the main page, the main HTML page. So typically when you're building web applications, you would have some sort of templating language on the server, and the server would take whatever code you've written in some template, maybe it's Django, maybe it's Jinja 2, maybe it's something else, JSPs, translate it to HTML, send it down to the browser, and then the browser would interpret it. And so as a developer, you're always doing this mental math or this mental transformation where you're looking at the template language and you're trying to imagine in your head what the HTML is going to look like, and then what the browser is going to do with that HTML, and then what the UI is going to look like. And so you're sort of always one level removed from the actual HTML that they're trying to build, which is the native language. So if you look at an Angular HTML page and you look at the source code, you can actually read it. It is the template itself. So right here, I just search for this Angular expression called ngRepeat, which tells it to repeat certain elements. So you see here I have a heading, which is my projects, and then I have this table with a table row that's repeated. And it's repeated once for every project that I have. So what does that look like? That's right here, these 2 projects. These are 2 rows in the table. And so I can look at this code and I can write all my HTML and I don't have to do this kind of mental math.
You can actually look at it in a browser and actually
You can look at a browser.
All the data isn't there, but you get some sample data in what you've done. And yeah, it's
exactly.
great.
So you can debug applications. And I think one of the taglines, to kind of paraphrase it for Angularjs, is it's the HTML development experience if HTML had been written for dynamic web applications. And I think that really kind of sums it up for me, is that HTML was designed for static apps. We've done kind of all these hacks to make it dynamic. But once you throw in Angular, it feels like you're in a natural development environment and you want to build more apps. That's ultimately, I think, what we're out and about in Google Developer Relations, is making the development experience really good for developers. Having that best experience where you're productive, you're building stuff, you want to build more stuff, getting that excitement back into development. That's what Angular is about, and that's what the Cloud Playground's about.
Great.
So going back to architecture a little bit, we've had the like Python, Ruby, JavaScript evaluators, in the browser have been really great. What were some of the main challenges that you feel was your approach any different than some of those evaluators?
It was. I looked at a lot of different playgrounds. You have obviously the sites like JS Fiddle that allow you to manipulate some JavaScript, HTML, and CSS and sort of try out widgets or little things in a web browser. There's a lot of tools out there that let you evaluate a snippet of code in a web browser. Golang, for example, if you look at the Google I/O concurrency slides, there's a nice little HTML5 slide deck with code snippets and a little run button. And every time you click run, the code executes on the server and you see the results. And you can kind of interact with code. Even the Golang tour, Dart the Dart language has a similar tour where you can go through and edit code in browser and run it. But almost all of these playgrounds are snippet-based. They're sort of about learning the fundamentals of the language. What does print do, or printf, or how do I calculate Fibonacci numbers, or how do I do simple stuff? But none of them are. As soon as you want to go to something more, you end up on the other end of the spectrum with kind of a full-fledged cloud development experience, a cloud IDE, like CodeEnvy or what's the other one?
Cloud9?
DevTable. Yes, DevTable is the other. Just two of the ones that come to mind that have kind of app engine integration. So on the one end of the experience, you have these snippets, let's learn the language. The other end, you have the cloud IDE or desktop IDE, which is the full, rich environment, lots of functionality, lots of productivity, but there's a kind of a steep learning curve. And there was very little in between, and that's where the Cloud Playground tries to fit. It gives you access to sort of mini projects. So here I have 4 different files, source files in my project, and I can play around with that. I can have one file here. This is my Python file where the code executes. Then I have this index.html, which is my server-side template. Old-fashioned. Why aren't you using Angular? Okay. But so we're trying to strike this balance of let's get you doing something simple like Hello World, a guestbook, something more than a trivial snippet of code, without the learning curve required once you go to a full development.
So that kind of is kind of half an answer to my next question, which is going to be, some people were asking whether you'd have integration for full cloud-based code editors like CodeEnvy. I
haven't really thought a lot about it, but I think that's something that's really interesting. Because what I showed here was sort of I'm reading about App Engine from the documentation. Let's upgrade me to a place where I can edit code snippets or tiny little projects. And a natural extension to that is, let's say I play around with this for a couple hours, and I'm actually starting to build something interesting, where I want to do some tighter integration with mobile, and I want to use cloud endpoints, or I'm just doing more, and I'm starting to invest in the platform. How do I take what I've built so far and move on to the next step? So one easy way to do that might be to have download my source as zip or push it to a Git repository so I can play around with it. But I think another great option would be let's export it to CodeEnvy, and let's upgrade my experience from this playground to a full-fledged IDE.
Is it like going steady?
Yeah, it's
Gone past the dating
it's,
stage.
yeah, it's like getting engaged.
Let's see how long we take this metaphor. Keep it going.
I think when you push your
You're not
code to
watching
production,
movies at home. You're on the couch.
I think when you ultimately push your code to production and do a full deploy, I think that's like getting married.
That was a good run.
All right, yeah,
All right.
okay.
All right.
I think we took it all the way to the end. All
We
right.
did.
So, that does bring us to the end, I think.
Did you have any final thoughts? You mentioned like feedback a little earlier.
Yeah, I'd love to get feedback. Maybe the best place is on the blog post on the Google Cloud Platform. There's comments there. Reach out via email, of course, is always great as well. Just discussion online. I'd love to see what people build, and I'd also really like to hear where we should go next with the Cloud Playground.
Great. Yeah. So I mean, all the things we've talked about today, we'll have links in the show notes and stuff. I was going to do a few quick shout outs before we end this week's show. As was mentioned, Code Envy. We recently had some announcements about the third-party ability to edit code on Chromebooks in the cloud. So you should check that out, especially if you're a Chromebook or Chrome Pixel user, like Fred is. And as some of you may know, we recently had the 2-year birthday celebration for Google+. It was June 28th in 2011 that was launched. So, and Chris Messina has a nice post on G+, of course, properly hashtagged, I assume, about it. And that'll be in the notes as well. And then I wanted to end with a shout out, particularly for our community folks, the Google developer groups. There was this recent Android Developer Days in Ankara in Turkey, but it wasn't just the GDGs in Turkey. There were actually 14 separate GDGs from multiple countries that collaborated on putting together the Android Developer Days in Ankara, and there were more than 1,000 participants. So that really deserves a special shout out in terms of community development efforts. And if you would like to be, your community efforts, your developer, it doesn't have to be a Google developer group, just Google developer related technology. You can kind of shout out to us on Google Plus with the hashtags GDTech and about it. And we're going to end with a magic moment from the developer days in Ankara, a photo from there. And if you'd like to see your photos at the end of some future segment, just add the GDTech hashtag and hashtag magic for magic moments. And with that, I think call it a wrap.
I think that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Totally.